So how's everybody's week been? Excellent. Anybody get arrested? No, not yet. Okay, good. Keep that up. I hope you guys all had a wonderful week. What I wanted to do was talk about this week's subject. But before doing that, I wanted to look at some of the questions that people have been asking me about the projects and everything, and different things like that. And I thought that would be really good. If that's all right with you guys. Now, in the research direction document description, there should have be some links that you guys get to, which gives you a number of different websites. Let's see, I'm just trying to pull it up right now to see if it's in there. And if it's not in there, then I will take care of that before we get off the meeting, or before I send the meeting out tonight.
The only thing that it shows when it says to submit your first research or discovery project is like the guidelines only. And the guidelines doesn't really provide any extra links or anything. It just basically lets us know the differences.
Scowling because I'm trying to discover where I put these links. There we go. Okay. Yeah, the subject for this week is Gobeklitepe, Sumer, and Ancient Egypt. But before we get to that, in the module that describes the discovery projects and things, I believe, there should be some links there that I want to share with you guys. And this will be important. Well, let's see. Okay, it looks like I did not put the links in. All right, that's a big. I think it's absolutely wonderful what technology provides for us, but I did not put some links in. I have about a half a dozen really good links to websites where you plug in a website address, a URL, and it gives you the MLA style format citation. Does everybody know what MLA format citations are? Is there anybody who doesn't, rather? Okay. Whenever you're writing, okay, Catherine, does that mean, or your hand? I see that your hand is up, Catherine. What do you have?
I just wanted to let you know that when I was working on the first weekly reflection.
I'm sorry, Catherine, your microphone's off.
Oh shoot. Can you hear me now or no? Okay. Let's see.
Oh, okay. Your microphone works perfectly fine.
Thank you. No, you're good.
Did anybody hear me?
Provide one link. We can hear you just fine. Yeah.
Okay. Geez, I feel like a ding dong. Okay. Well, I have like a half a dozen, and it's when I transfer class over to the new semester, like 99% of everything comes over really cleanly and nice, and it's all super nice. But it seems like the two things that screw up are always two things that that are really frustrating to fix. So, okay. So Catherine, there was one link you said.
Yeah. The problem was it's acting up though, because I went to use it, but it would actually crash and freeze the computer. And I tried different devices, the citationmachine.net one. I just wanted to give a heads up that that's the only link that showed up because it was on the weekly reflection one, but I don't know if anyone else ran into issues. It's just for me, when I was trying to use it for the citations, it ended up just freezing on me a bunch of times. So
Okay.
I was going to say if you might have any different ones we could try out, since that one, at least for me, wasn't working well.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. You get the gold star stapled to your forehead today. What I'm going to do is I have at least a half a dozen of these, and I'll put them in the weekly reflection #1, as well as the project, the first project, and then I'll also put it in. Let's see. Actually, I'm going to try to put it in all the weekly reflections, but I'll at least get it in one, and I'll try to put it in the opening, the syllabus thing too, so you guys have it in several spots, and I will email them. Yeah, whenever you do a paper, are any of you guys familiar with archive.net or .org? It's also called the Wayback Machine. Oh, Milo, it looks like your hand is up.
I was just gonna say, can you guys hear me, by the way?
I can hear you, and that's the only thing that counts.
Okay. I was gonna say that Scribr, SCR.
Oh, that's an excellent one.
That's another good citation generator. You might have to add more information, like it might not like catch all of it, but the formatting should be accurate.
Okay, that is perfect. Thank you very much. That's excellent. Yeah, Scribr is excellent. What archive.org does is anytime, okay, never send photos of yourself to anybody on your phone, the internet, email, anything that you don't want your great aunt Edna to see, okay? Because everything that is digitized is on there permanently, forever. And archive.org helps you to find those. Do you guys know who Richard Hoagland is? There's actually a point to this. Yeah, archive.org is what the website is. And what I love about them is you can type in, you can use their Wayback Machine, you can type in a URL and then a date of access, and it will take you back to what you would have seen on that day, Tuesday, February 2nd, 2004, or whatever. The reason I mentioned Richard Hoagland, he's a big speaker in the government denies UFO activity realm, speaker thing. And what does that have to do with art history? Not a whole lot. However, he was able to show that he was able to actually prove that NASA does redigitize imagery from the moon, which is supposed to be available for every US citizen. And they actually do alter and watermark images that are supposed to be free access because our taxpayer dollars fund them. And the reason he was able to do this is because he used archive.org to find out what the image looked like on the day that NASA released it, and then what it looked like 3 days later after NASA altered it. What that proves is that somebody at NASA approves people putting images up online before they're ready to release them. I don't think that, I'm sorry, Joey, but I don't think that necessarily proves that aliens are running the government. But one can hope. But the reason why that is important, I'll cycle back to what Catherine and Milo were both talking about. When you are doing papers or anything like that, where you are referencing your material and if you are not using references, if you're not quoting material, then you don't need citations. But if you are quoting anything specific, you do. And if you use an image off the net, include the access point, the access URL that you have with that image. And sometimes you can just do that by, when you submit a paper, do a hyperlink in the image itself. And that works just fine. But the reason why all this stuff is important is that when anybody wants to come back and look at your material, they need to be able to get access to the same information that you had access to. And so when you make your MLA citation, and MLA stands for an academic chain of words that is like M stands for one word, L stands for another word, and A stands for another word. I don't know what they stand for, but that they stand for something that's important. But MLA is the standard citation format that we use in academia and educational material that deals with art history. And that's why that's the format that we use. I think it's communication arts in general, but specifically art history. And so when you are doing your research or discovery projects, and you are referencing, for example, the sources that you got your vanilla coconut cake recipe that was really popular during the Second Crusade or whatever, you will turn it into MLA format. And at the end of that citation, after the period, you will have an accessed on phrase. And this is really important. Anything that you access online, the accessed on phrase gives the date of whenever you collected the material or whenever you saw it. What I love about MLA is that there are citation styles for absolutely everything. And that's why I want people to go to Scrivener or any of the other citation engine sites that I'll share with you, or you can even do a search for MLA citation generation, anything like that. And what I love about them is if you are abducted by an alien that looks like Bigfoot, taken to their mothership that is cycling around Mars, and you're interviewing the alien mother queen, there is an MLA citation format for that live in-person in-alien interview. Can you believe that? There is actually an MLA citation format for that. It's a lot easier if you just stick to online sources. Please don't plan on getting abducted. Weird things happen. But of course, I'm not speaking from personal experience whatsoever. But when you do your research and discovery projects, and if you choose to use research to reference in your weekly reflections, please make sure that you do everything in that MLA format. And then at the end of the citation, you include accessed on, and then the date that you accessed it. Does that make sense to everybody? And that needs to be done for every format or every citation. Now, if you have 3 citations, how do you organize them? What's the proper way to organize them? Well, there are 2 different ways. One is to organize it in the way that the sequence that you use them. But what's the actual correct way to organize the citations? Anybody?
Alphabetical.
Yes, exactly. It needs to be alphabetical. If you are doing embedded annotations in your larger paper, that's the only time that it's appropriate to order the citations in the order that you use them. And then at the end of your paper, you still need to have an alphabetical citation list. So I would just don't embed anything, just do it alphabetical. And if you're going to do an annotated bibliography, even if you found a book that started with an author that started with an A, and then you found an article, and then you found this other thing, and the citation list, when it's alphabetical, is all out of the sequence you found it, that doesn't matter. That's still the way it needs to be. All right, is that clear for everybody? Does that help? Okay, because I got like 3 emails about that, and I hope that works. Now, if you've already submitted a project and the citations aren't like that, when I go through and grade them, I'll write that down, turn it back, and just turn around and resubmit it. Milo, Jacob, or Joey, if any of you turn in a paper like that where I asked you to do the accessed on phrase and reorder it, was it a big deal to get it regraded? No. Okay. Yeah, I would rather you guys, if you have to turn it back in 3 or 4 times to get everything just right, do that so you can get the perfect score. Don't be settled with something less than you deserve. Okay. And that's a good rule for life generally. Unless, you're like me with no personality, no friends, and no hope for the future, then you've settled. Okay. Now, so I talked about the citation projects. The other thing that I'm sorry, the projects, the discovery and research projects. One thing I wanted to do is just go over people's submissions really quick for ideas. Now, remember, what are the parameters, the 2 real parameters that we need to deal with for this class? that kind of hem us in. The first one is it needs to be done. It needs to be of something that was done between 2 million years ago and 1349, before the birth of the Renaissance. That's the first one. The second one, you need to be able to somehow justify or discuss it as fitting into the art space. And some of the easiest ways to do that, if you're doing a cooking thing, like if you want to demonstrate how people fried fish that they caught in the Columbia River 1,200 years ago, then see if you can find some of the paintings done, like the Yakima Nation's Cultural Museum in southeastern Washington has a series of murals that is done by Yakima Nation individuals, and they show people preparing fish and baking them in clay. And you could find a recipe that fits that and tie it into one of their paintings. That would, not only are you fitting within the time parameters of this class, but you are solidly tying it into some sort of an art realm. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, excellent. I see a few people nodding, and I'm going to guess that Micah, Mark, and Milo, I hope that you guys are nodding too. All right. So I thought that it would be really good. I haven't put this thing together. That was going to be my thing for Labor Day, so I don't have to do anything about barbecuing and socializing. Ick. So I wanted to share with you some of the ideas that people have. And I wanted to talk about the format too. Before I go through and grade everything, I want to give everybody a chance to resubmit some of the ones that aren't quite correct. So I'm going, and I'll show you what I mean. So, and please, if you see your submission on the screen, I tried to hide your name. I'm not doing a very good job of it because it won't allow me to block it out. But I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just showing random examples, okay? All right, now this person has submitted 3 different examples, 3 different ideas, and we're just going to pick one. But do you remember what the format is that you're supposed to send it in? In the assignment, what it talks about is you have an initial 1 line where you talk about it briefly. Then you have a 3 to 5 sentence paragraph where you describe it. And then the last short line is going to be how long it takes. And so for full points, this person just needs to go back and rework these, retype them, and resubmit it so that it's in that format. But I really like these ideas. Now, this one, this one is kind of an interesting second idea for a project, essay or Google slideshow of movies, films, and video games inspired by the time period we studied. And this is really interesting. Now, this is 2710, so it would have to be something inspired before 1349. But that would be really interesting. Does anybody know of any video games or movies inspired by the art world before 1350? Oh, Catherine, you have another question?
No, it's just to raise my hand to give an example of the games.
Okay, yes, please give an example.
So technically anything that could give some examples. I know it's not fully artwork, but the Assassin's Creed series actually does have periods of like Roman, Egypt, and even like certain cultures to where you do see like how people were dressed, items in there, and like artifacts. So even though it's like not just about art stuff, it does have elements that tie into them, and the teams over in Ubisoft who work on them do actually do proper research as far as what the times are and as far as what is in the game. So it does accurately depict what you're seeing of those time periods. So that is one example you guys can actually use on for that.
That's excellent. Thank you, Catherine. And what I would suggest, if you're going to go the route and do this kind of thing, I think it would be brilliant. I would go do the Frank Miller route. Do any of you know who Frank Miller is? He's the guy that breathed life into Batman after Burt Ward. Okay, well, what Frank Miller did in his graphic novel 300 is he scoured archaeological sites for weaponry that the Persians and Spartans used in that time period. And except for the costumes of the Spartans, and there's even some debate about how that could have been rather accurate too. But the Battle of Thermopylae, he actually did all those things for that comic book that then later became the Zack Snyder movie. You can actually identify things from the British collection of Spartan era artifacts and Persian era artifacts, or artifacts from that time from Persia, because of his visual accuracy with the actual artifacts. And so if you're going to do something like this with Assassin's Creed or anything like that, I would say, yeah, I want to look at what's the costume that people are wearing, and what kind of weaponry do they have. And then here's something that I found that's actually from a painting of the time, or a kid's graffiti on a Coliseum or something like that. And I think it would be a really interesting project to tie that in. So yes, very good. Now, instead of showing you more of well, actually, no, I'm just gonna click through and pick somebody else at random too. Okay, now I want to show this example really quick. And if you're the person who wrote this, please don't be embarrassed. Okay. Okay, this is a perfect example of the kind of format we're looking at. Okay, so the person is wants to render a 3D model of an object or structure we are currently discussing in class. And then this is really interesting. And then they are just describing using Blender or something like that to make as detailed as possible image renders of something that we viewed in class, and doing it as close as possible. I think this is a really great idea. The only thing that I think we could open this up to is you guys should have not access to all the modules, but access to all the module titles. And if any of them right now strike you as fascinating to look at, and we haven't gotten there yet, you can go ahead and use that as an inspiration for your project too. Like if you just think that Carolingian art is all the bee's knees and it's just absolutely amazing, or you want to do something about Kamehameha, King Kamehameha, we are going to be looking at Oceania in the future, and we are going to be looking at several of these other things as well. If you see it and are inspired by it in the titles of any of the modules, whether or not we can open them, talk to me and we'll get it sorted out so you can work on it. Last semester, one person did an actual scale model of a feathered cloak that is attributed to King Kamehameha, and it was astonishingly cool. They even filmed what a pain in the absolute butt it was to put this thing together. So excellent work. But we hadn't even gotten to that module yet, and they picked it. So I think that's an excellent example. And what I'm seeing in a lot of these submissions, and I've already mentioned it to a couple people, but then I just quit grading. A couple people, or several people actually missed the whole format structure when they submitted. And then we also have a person who actually submitted an entire project for the challenge moving forward. So they're going to miss the points unless they resubmit with the actual proposal instead of the project. Remember, you were not supposed to submit a project for this one. You were just supposed to submit a proposal. So I'm going to share this one. This is another really good one. Let's say, so curate an art show. And they're talking about curating a digital art show. And this is kind of fun because the student is designing a show around a particular theme and time period or area, and then exhibiting that in the digital space. And I thought this would be really cool. And then they also said, I also thought of making gallery in an app like Minecraft. I think that would be great. The only thing that they're missing on this is their guess of the time. So this is an excellent proposal. I would say they just need to submit a guess on time estimation. And then these are really well formatted because you have here the statement at the end with the time. And then this is research on ancient civilization architecture compared to the same region currently. I think this is really good. It ties in the past and the future. And that could be really fascinating. Have any of you ever visited the Seattle Underground? Anybody? The Seattle Underground, or anybody been to Dwarka in India? The Seattle Underground is really amazing because when Seattle was first built as a town, they were actually the first large city in North America that had the tide tables printed for everybody. You know, everybody had access to the tide tables. They needed that because most of the toilets in the lower third of Seattle, close to the seashore, would drain directly into the ocean. And when the tide came in, it would be like a fire hose going right back up the toilet. And so if you were sitting on the toilet at the time, just imagine that for a second. You know, well, don't imagine that for a second. And so Seattle also was the largest single-use market, or the largest market for the back spray for sewage as well, for families' sewer systems. They would have caps that would seal off the toilet. But why is all that important? Because they started building about 1850, and by about 1895, all the things that they had built started sinking down into the mud and gook. And so Seattle built over it. They just built roads over the tops of all these buildings. And there's areas throughout Seattle where you can go and see that 150-year-old architecture. It's just 15 feet below street level. And so this kind of a project would be really kind of fun to explore. If you could find records or like a restructured house that is now built over, or find a community somewhere in the world that has people walking around one of these ancient buildings, that'd be a lot of fun. Anyway, going on. So that's another example of a really good one. Okay, and then this one is shares a discovery project that I think is really brilliant. Again, this needs to be reformatted a little bit so it matches the format that I provided. But process and look of Egyptian art by creating papyrus bookmarks. And there are a number of different things that you can do to do this. And this person already did some of the preliminary research for you. But I think that this is really brilliant. And they said it should only take 3 to 4 hours. If you watch a number of videos and plan it out, that's all it has to take, 3 to 4 hours. If you're trying to reinvent stuff, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, that's excellent. So it looks like a lot of these proposals are ones that need to be just reformatted and then turned back in, resubmitted. And it simple thing. And then this person talks about the geometry of the Stonehenge type places, the megalithic stone circles. That sounds like a really interesting thing. What are some of the things that are common among these proposals, or that stick out for you for the proposals? Does it spark any ideas? Now, what I will do is between now and Labor Day, I'll try to do it before then. I think I'm going out of town tomorrow. But what I will be doing is putting all these into a single document so that everybody can see them. And we're also pushing the due date back a week for this first project. So everybody gets a chance to see what these things are. So, but what are some of the ideas that stand out from the things that we looked at really briefly? And do you guys have any other ideas that sound like might be interesting? They don't have to be things that you're going to do yourself. Don't even worry about that. We're just talking about ideas now.
I really liked the digital art show. I thought that was a really cool idea.
Yeah, and I think it's a brilliant idea because you could apply it to pretty much anything there's a record of on the internet, and you can compile and put an art show together. Yeah, that's excellent. And I would just you could just follow the format of a show. You could even go over and talk to oh, what's his name? The guy who runs Sears Gallery. I can't remember his name right now, but he is an excellent art historian, curator, and you could even ask him some of the, for some pointers on putting a show together, or even look online for help. Yeah, I think that's great. But what I love about that is it's absolutely versatile for any time period that you're interested in. So excellent. Any other ideas?
I would say the one with the video game and just trying to relate that is honestly really fun because, I mean, at least given for me, since I'm trying to get into the video game industry myself, I low-key feel like that sometimes video game is a media of art that kind of just gets dismissed depending on the person, because there are some people that are much more on traditional fine art, and then those with digital art kind of have their own views and ideas of what classifies as it and not. But I feel like that honestly would be a fun idea just because video games have had a lot of inspirations from all forms of art.
Yeah, I think that that's really good. And it is a lot of fun to tie in contemporary stuff with ancient stuff. I'm sorry, Caleb, you guys, you're on page 2, so I don't see you. And I feel like you're like, the step kid that everybody forgets about. So I'm sorry. I will try to switch back and forth. Um, Caleb, what was the most fun project you? Could you tell us a little bit about your inspiration behind the tea pie that you did? And I believe it was for the Baroque art period. How did you get to that, and how would somebody adapt something like that to this class?
Essentially, I believe there was some art with a pie. I don't recall the story, but I believed a woman made a tea pie for her husband, and uh, I guess it turned out horrible or something. They didn't know what to do with this tea they had, so she made a pie with it. And then I decided to make my own tea pie, and it actually turned out delicious. I might have cheated with, well, I actually didn't even cheat with any of the ingredients. Um, and I also made a uh, Leonardo da Vinci 14th century chicken. I thought that turned out really cool too, tying that in with an art piece and something that they would have actually ate at that time period, as well as that chicken being in a art piece.
Yes, thank you very much. And what was cool when Caleb presented this, he made a short video that kind of showed the process of building, and then he also tied it in with the paintings that he found that inspired them. Like the chicken one was from a Renaissance era painting, and the tea pie was from an Enlightenment era painting. And it, just a still life painting, but he was able to identify, this is a pie. It looks like a tea pie, and he found a recipe that was in use in the 16th century. So incredibly, very cool stuff. And I think that that's kind of fun because it gives everybody an opportunity to explore an aspect about art history that they can actually be engaged with. And I think things like that are a lot more interesting if you guys insist on quit boring quizzes. Because Brittany has written me like 6 emails so far saying, please give me boring quizzes. And I don't want to do it. So that's not true. She hasn't written more than 2. But And then tattoos. Adam on campus here, he has a black leather top hat, and he owns the tattoo studio that's close to Santa Clara. But he was in my contemporary art class, and what he did is used contemporary AI to go through, look at World War II era tattoos and plane decorations, plane paintings, and then adapt it to show somebody from Peaky Blinders. So he did an AI generated tattoo design and actually walked through the process of applying that to a person because he found somebody who wanted that tattoo. And it was really just an interesting extrapolation and exploration of a traditional art form, but through contemporary means. So, you know, all the ideas that you guys are coming up with are great, but please do go through and reformat if you need to. I'll grade all the ones right now that are in the correct format, and I'll just put a note on yours to reformat if it's not in the correct one, and then so just cycle around, put it in the correct format, and turn it back in. Remember, the correct format is a 1-line description, 3 to 5 sentence paragraph going through it, and then at the end a single line that gives the time that it should take. Looking forward to the very final project that we're going to do that takes 10 hours. That seems really daunting. And at the first part of November, what you're going to do is send me a proposal for what that project is going to be. And you tell me about an outline of what you want to do, how much time each part is going to take you. And then once you get approval, then you start on that final project. But as you are doing these projects, think, you know, each one is 3 to 5 hours. So all you have to do is come up with 3 of these mini projects that fit together and relate to each other for the 10 hours. And, you know, if you start planning and thinking ahead, look at the module titles, which ones are interesting to you. And as we get closer to it, ask me about, can I do something on this? I'm not expecting anybody to be this proactive right away, but by the end of September, I hope that everybody has in their heads the things that they want to do their projects on. And because I really don't want you to wait until the last 2 weeks of school, and then you realize I've got, oh crap, I've got to do 34 hours of projects. Because, you know, a little bit here and there is a lot easier than a whole lot all at once. I was going to use a really awful simile comparison that had to do with things we can't talk about on a recorded line. So just imagine some sort of simile that helps you, you know, encapsulate everything I was saying. And pretend that I was the author. Okay. So does anybody have any questions about the subject matter? Now I want to, I'm just moving on because I really don't care if you do. That's not true. I didn't see any hands go up. Okay, I want to talk about what the difference between research and discovery projects are and talk about this. So the 6 projects during the semester that you need to do, and then the final capstone, fall into 2 categories: research projects and discovery projects. Research projects are things when you do like a slideshow, annotated bibliography, or a report with photos. Okay, those are all research kind of things. Heavy on citations, annotations, either verbal or written. And on this, you don't even have to show your face when you do the videoing. Like if you're presenting a slideshow, the easiest way to present the slideshow is to have it on your computer and then present it through a Teams meeting where you're the only attendee and share your screen, so that the only part of you that's being recorded is your voice. And I don't know if I told you this, but I have had several students did not want to record their own voice, so they wrote the script and had somebody else record it. And I love that when I know the student is like a 19-year-old young lady with a high-pitched voice, and she has her, post 3-pack a day grandpa doing the narration. It's awesome. Really gravelly voice. Hi, this is where you're expecting a high-pitched voice, and it actually comes out. Hi, this is Brittany. I'm going to do my report on flower arranging by the Spartans. I think that's really engaging. But whatever you want to do, you do not have to show yourself in any of the research presentations, but it does need to be in a format that we can access. So Google Slides can be problematic, but if you record it, like with a Teams call to yourself, then the benefit of that is you can download it in an MP4, MOV, or WAV file, and I can upload it to the class YouTube channel and everybody can see it. All right. Another thing that's really important, do not submit these via your phone unless you're very careful about taking off the privilege issues, because if I don't have access to it, if I need special privileges to access it, then I can't grade it. So it's important to make sure that when you submit it without permissions needed. Now, discovering projects. So I talked about a couple different kinds of research projects. Discovery projects, that is when you do something. And people in the past have done some really amazing things. I told you about the tattoo person. Somebody else, if any of you have heard of the Mississippi Valley civilizations that predated the American colonists or the European colonists. And then there's also the Ife or Yoruba Kingdom civilizations. Some people have done things from those cultures and built them with more contemporary tools, but to look like it belongs within that culture, or rebuilding something. One student filmed himself going to the Virgin River, doing what was needed to collect clay, and then making sun-dried clay pots, just as the indigenous peoples of this area would have done, 1,500 years ago. Very, very cool stuff. And those kinds of things are really enjoyable. Say you're enamored of the Ottoman Empire, the early Ottomans, 1280 to 1920 actually is one of the longest running ancient empires. But they, starting about 1280, you start seeing this language of flowers. And even though a lot of the Ottoman Empire took place during the Renaissance, if you can find some sort of callback to their use of flowers and the language of flowers before then you could do a flower arrangement. But when you do it, you would film yourself putting the flowers together and with a voiceover explaining, this is what this flower meant. This is what this flower meant. And then at the end, show the arrangement, say, so according to the Ottoman era language of the flowers that started in 1280 AD, tying it back to the realm of this class, this flower arrangement would actually be a communication that meant this. So are you guys getting this? There's lots of different kinds of things to say or to do. And then I talk about the research projects, description of the subject and your thesis, presentation. Now, 3 different styles are a PowerPoint presentation recorded with your voiceover in a video format, an annotated bibliography including 5 sources, or a PDF report complete with 8 photos appropriately embedded in the document. And in this one, annotated bibliography, I talk about that more, but it needs to have 5 sources, and then you have 2 paragraphs of annotations. One is a summary paragraph, and the second is a reflection paragraph. And each paragraph, the first paragraph, the summary is 2 to 3 sentences. Second paragraph or the reflection is 3 to 5 sentences. Difference between them is the summary talks about the source, the citation, and explains what it was, and the reflection talks about what you learned when you experienced the source. And the source could be an online article, a book you found online, a book you found in the library, and they still exist, or like a YouTube video, and which is really neat. And then annotated bibliography at the end of your citation. What do you have to include at the end of each of them? What's the phrase?
Accessed on?
Accessed on. Excellent. Right. Perfect. And then, for the PDF report, if you wanted to do that, I would include a URL or citation for each of the photos and where you get your information, but you do not have to do the notes on it. You just have to have the citation. And in this case, at the back of it, you still order everything alphabetically at the very end of it. And throughout, you can put numbers, link numbers to the images and say, this is citation 3 or whatever. There's lots of different ways to do it. And if there's any confusion, you can talk to me about it. For the discovery projects, what you're doing is finding information that you want to explore and do. And when you present it, you're going to be presenting like a time-lapse video, images of your thing that you made. I'm thinking, I can't remember who it was, but there were a couple people who actually did time-lapse images, a short time-lapse film of the entire process of painting that they did. And then while you were watching that, they did the voiceover and said, these are the decisions I made and why. And when they presented it, it was that painting or that video. And then the last bit of the video was actually a last screen that stayed on screen for about 15 seconds that showed all the citations. And that works really good. All right. So hopefully everybody kind of gets this and understands it. And if you don't, let me know. Does anybody have any questions about that? Catherine.
So when I went to check the details about the report or discovery projects, I saw that you noted how basically we just have to go with like at least 2 of each version. Besides the 2 of each version, would the others just be basically how we can come up with some fun variation of our own or our own way to kind of depict however we want the projects to be, or do you prefer them to still fall under like the guidelines of a research or a discovery project? I was just kind of curious on that part, since 4 of them would have to be either one of those 2, but then it seems like it leaves the others open to interpretation.
That's a really good question, and that's something that I need to write it perhaps more clearly. But out of those projects, 2 need to be research and 2 need to be discovery, but the remaining can be whatever mix you want of either research or discovery. But they do need to follow either research or discovery.
Okay. No, you're good. I just had it because when I'm looking at the guidelines, I just see the part where it mentions it. It just says, out of the 7 projects to be done throughout the term, at least 2 need to be research and at least 2 need to be discovery. And so it just has it where I was just curious as far as like with how that's worded out, if that still means that like you still want us to still at least follow the guidelines, but then we can just kind of tweak how we choose to show those next projects.
Yeah, and that's really good. Let's see.
It's in like the first set of bullets points when you're like after you explained how research and discovery projects are and like kind of differentiate them before you kind of really go into the details.
Okay. Let's see. All right, then I'll do this. Okay, I just added something and I'm updating it right now. If one of you guys want to go back and look at that really quick, see what you think, if that clarifies it. Okay, and then we're going to get to what I was supposed to be talking about this week. Milo, yes.
Sorry, I did have a question. For the discovery project, if we were doing a PDF report, would that still need to be like a voice over video? or can you just submit like the PDF document with the pictures and descriptions and things?
Well, if you do the PDF report with the 8 photos, you still need the citations, but it just needs to be the PDF. And a lot of these are going to be like 5 to 8 pages long. Just debate because you're showing the photo big enough that people can see it, and then you're writing about each one, which chews up a lot of landscape, but that does not need to be in a video as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, now, do you guys remember our discussion last week about the Renaissance? I'm going to show a screen, which means I can't see all of your smiling faces. So if you want to just take yourself off mute, you can answer that way. But remember, we talked about the Renaissance. What does Renaissance mean? Does anybody remember? The first one to remember can shout it out. Anybody remember what the word Renaissance means?
Rebirth.
Rebirth. Excellent. Thank you. Now, as we look at this, remember we were looking at the deciphering the language of the Renaissance, the visual language. Thank you, Joey, by the way. The rebirth that happened of culture happened, I think, in a large part because of the cross-pollination of cultures. People were coming home and building things that kind of reminded them of what they experienced elsewhere in the world. And people, the average person in Europe between about 500 AD and, believe it or not, until about 1915, lived and died within 22 miles of where they were born. Can you believe that? 22 miles. I mean, that's not even to Cedar City. Laverca maybe, but not even to Cedar City. And so you get these people that have been all the way around the world. No, figuratively speaking, they've been to North Africa, they've been to the Middle East, sometimes even to India and back, and they're bringing all this stuff with them. And there's, with a lower literacy rate than the Carolingians, which is
I think last time we talked about Neolithic art.
Wait a sec. I am telling everybody about the Renaissance. We don't want to talk about the Renaissance. I'm sorry. Oh, Caleb, you should have caught that.
I was curious to see where you're going to tie this in. I was like, Andrew's the Pachenko mind. I was ready for it.
Just gonna go with it. See where this went as well. Yeah.
So for everybody that thought I was going batshit crazy, you were completely right. Okay, we're sharing this. All right, we're talking about ancient civilizations. I am so sorry. Of course, we did not talk about the Renaissance last week. That's why nobody knew what it meant. I'm sorry, Aubrey. The look on your face that was priceless. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the thing that we were actually supposed to be talking about. Remember Genevieve von Pensinger? Everybody remembers her, right? What's the big thing that she did? She discovered what? Anybody, just shout it out.
She found the symbols in the caves out in Europe.
Yeah. She found a vocabulary of symbols. Vocabulary probably isn't the right word because there isn't a specific language attached to it, but she found that people were communicating in a regular pattern. Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that is so frustrating to me about the assumptions people say or make when they talk about prehistoric civilizations. The idea that somehow people that are older than us who are died before we came along are stupid or dumber than us simply does not hold up under any kind of intentful scrutiny. If you take any of us and dump any of us into a culture that was around 3,000 years ago, how many of us do you think would survive and be happy? You know, I try to eat my healthy, but every once in a while, gosh darn it, I need a ding dong. And I don't know if any of you have gone to a really distant foreign country and eaten the street food that they have there, and you're thinking, why would anybody put this in their mouth? And just compound that multiply that by 10,000. I think that's what it would be like throwing us back 3,000 years ago. So when we look at ancient civilizations, the thing that we need to look at, we need to look at them through the lens of they were every bit as smart as we are, maybe smarter in many respects, and what they did was different. But different does not mean dumb or smart, it just means different. Now on this, I have a couple different links that I want you guys to go to just to explore. The story of Atlantis. I'm going to talk about it really quick. I found actually about 23 different Atlantises around the world. And that's just off the top of my head. There are a lot more. Atlantis has become a symbol for that kind of prehistorical culture that all the records which survive are by word of mouth and become legend. So there's the time of myth of ancient China. There's the dream time of the Australian outback. There is the time of the spirits, or the time of the different races for the Aztecs and for Southwest indigenous groups. And you go to Africa, and anybody want to guess how many languages were invented on the continent of Africa? Anybody want to guess? 14,000. Over the last 2 million years, humans have invented 14,000 languages on the continent of Africa. And that is everything from rebus and knot tying all the way to fantastic click languages. One of the hardest songs to sing in the world is the click song, and it was actually performed really beautifully. If you can find it on The Voice South Africa, if you can find that, the click song, it's astounding. But anyway, Atlantis is this idea that there is a supreme civilization that existed somehow and then disappeared, and we're just trying to remember it. And Plato was the first one to kind of use that word and really describe this idea in a form that became written. But it's every culture has them. And these things are not pretend. Anybody hear of Nagmadal? Or Namadal? Anybody heard of that? Ancient Apocalypse by Graham Hancock on Netflix is a set of 6 films that are really good. But he talks about Nagmadal, and it is actually in Indonesia. It is a palace that is made with basalt pillars, naturally formed basalt pillars that are stacked like Lincoln logs or Legos. But it was built long enough ago that the foundations are 25 to 30 feet underneath the present ocean level. Anybody want to guess how long ago that had to be built? It would have had to been built about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. It would have had to have been started. Can you imagine that? And of course, the French colonizers said, "Oh no, it's only 200 years old," when they showed up, because you can't. And then there's also off the southern Japan, southernmost island of Japan, there is this huge structure that's underwater, and it's called the Japanese Atlantis. You get Dwarka. Old Dwarka has actually been found in the ocean off of southwestern India. And there's all these kinds of things. What is interesting to me is a lot of these people just dismiss the mystery and decide they don't want to talk about it. But there is some really fascinating stuff. And one of the things that I want you guys to, let's see. All right. One of the things that we're looking at is going to be Gobeklitepe, which is, it is old enough that it was starting to be built as during the Younger Dryas event, which is when a meteorite struck the 2-mile thick ice sheet over Canada and caused a massive worldwide flood. This is about 10,000 years ago. So we're talking humans like we are today did not exist yet, quite, almost. We were getting there, but it was still very much the Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, and Denisovans coming together. Those three groups. So still very much human, but not quite like we are today. And these guys built a temple complex in Turkey over 10,000 years ago. And this is all now documented and everything. It's not open to speculation. And so there's all this stuff that is just absolutely fascinating. And when you go through this module, I just want you to get a feel. We are bridging the gap between the Paleolithic and really solid calendaric history. You know, there's a gap of about 20,000 years between the Neolithic, center of the Neolithic, and when we start seeing like the ruins that everybody's a lot more comfortable with, like, you know, Egyptian pyramids and stuff like that. There's still this huge gap. Göbekli just for sense of scale, is over 3 times older than Stonehenge or Cheops. So think about that for just a second. But I want to play this, and it may not make it to the recording, but what I'm playing for you is actually what some of these ancient languages sounded like. So let's see. Wait a sec. Okay. So this is what the Turkish sounded like when Göbekli Tepe was built, or not exactly, but you know, it's younger than that. But this is what an ancient Turkish sounded like.
Language. The Kultekin inscriptions.
Tengritek Tengride bolmuş Türk belge kagan bu ödüke olurtum. Sabımın tükütü esidegil ulayı eni yügünüm. Oğlanım, beriki oğuşum. Budunum, bir yaşat apıt bekler. Eriya tarkıt, buyruk bekler. 30.
And now I want to show you a little bit, or have you listen to a little bit of ancient Egyptian, what it could have sounded like.
Yarreibhat haticha, so abhat mer supotitien prosiatio, rachunin sum ach, Maria, shamsu sin hohe, jed.
And then ancient Akkadian. And these are all cultures that we're going to be looking at.
Nam ebima, murapima, isu ibbi, tamkarum, wakil khamisten, kiyam ulamidani, suma, salasa kurseyam, anatsin magir, sakannakim, addemma tuppasu, nasiyakuma istu.
What do you guys think about that?
Got a couple things bouncing around. So you talked about all these civilizations and their Atlantis stories, and then mentioned the young Dryas. Did I say that right? And meteorites basically melting a glacier. Just thinking about this massive shift in like that, you know, the end of the ice age, all of this displaced water sinking these cultures. You know, basically, why are there's so many civilizations that are underwater, right? That sort of thing.
Right.
It's kind of interesting. Does that fit? I always get mixed up on timelines. Is that sort of match this timeline, or?
Well, I think that's a really good observation and question. The Ice Age drew so much water into solid mass that you could walk from Europe to Virginia. Okay, and you know, so think about that for just a second. I mean, you're walking across permanent glaciers and stuff like that, but you can walk from Europe to the U.S. essentially. And one of the reasons why more information hasn't been found about the Cro-Magnons and Denisovans and Neanderthals is because it's estimated that between 90 and 97% of their settlements are now underwater. So, if we think today of things like our folk tales, how we visualize ourselves in our place of history, we see ourselves as being some sort of historical pinnacle with maybe 3,000 to 5,000 years behind us, getting us to where we are today. And what I want you to consider for a moment as we go into this art is think about the people that were alive 3,000 to 5,000 years ago also had 3,000 to 5,000 years of history that they kind of remembered by word of mouth. So it kind of puts a totally different perspective on it, doesn't it? It's not people rising from the mud and all of a sudden deciding, hey, let's build a highway. It's not like that at all. We're all built on something else. And I think it's also interesting to have those sounds in the back of your head of what that language might have looked like or sounded like when we look at these things, to give you some sort of sense of cognitive space to kind of place this within. And so I hope you revisit those videos and you just see what it makes you think about where these places are. And I kind of got carried away a little bit. Sorry, but I think it is really interesting to put things into that kind of perspective. I think it's totally worthwhile, because if we want to assume that our ancestors are as smart as we are, we also need to assume that they didn't come out of a vacuum just like we don't. And think about what makes up any of us. We are all functions of intersectionality, cultural intersectionality. My family came from Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, and the British Isles. I was raised with Dene and Shoshone. I lived in Alabama. That's just me. And then I also won the lottery. I'm a white male in the U.S. I mean, you can't get any better than that, right? I'm the poster child for white America. But all of us have all these different elements that make us up who we are, make us who we are. And that is every bit as true for our ancestors. So as we look at their art, it's always a good thing to think about, well, what kinds of things could they be symbolizing? What kinds of things are important to them? Why would they distort the human form and make the eyes bigger, or the forehead larger, or the head longer, or the neck longer? Why would they make the fingers look so narrow and delicate? What are the important things? Or like, remember our discussion on semiotics last week? What can anybody remind me what semiotics is?
I'm going to say it wrong, but it's basically what symbols mean.
Yeah.
Meaning of symbols.
Yeah, it's basically the context of meaning, essentially. So yeah, excellent. And so when we look at something like the Cycladic idol, there's remnants of painting like a human form and little children's clothing wrapped around it, and it's found inside of a home. Using semiotics and context, that is a pretty good chance it was some kid's Barbie doll. And then we look at the Venus figurines or the Venus votaries that are found in religious caves, spiritual caves settings. There's a good chance that those probably are votaries, just because of where they found. So think of this kind of thing. And why would so many people invest so much energy on temples? Today we want to believe that we are too mature to have close ties to religion. We don't need religion in our life every day. But the reality is that our sense of what that word or that term means, religion or spirituality, is very different than what it actually means. Essentially, it's a set of rules that we ascribe to help us navigate our place in the universe. That's what it is. And if we think of it that way, then we can see all of our culture, or the majority of our culture, very much also deals with visual imagery and symbolism that ties in with that kind of navigation of the universe. If we take the word religion and spirituality out of it, it's still very much symbolism that helps us navigate the universe. You know, one of those genres of symbolism today is movies. Another one is advertising. Another one is TikTok. These kinds of things in the ancient world, since electronic media was not as prevalent as it is today, a lot of that kind of imagery and symbolism to help somebody navigate their place in the universe is going to be sculptural. It's going to be the sacredness of the home, how guests are treated, the nature of responsibility of a head of family to principal wives, secondary wives, concubines, and slaves within the family. You know, all these things kind of tie in and become important for them. And when we get into, we'll talk about that later. I was going to talk about the graffiti that we find around coliseums, where little kids would paint, scribe into the walls the images and names of their favorite sports stars, which of course they call gladiators. And they even had action figures, just like there's action figures today about like basketball players and stuff like that. They had action figures back then that you could actually buy of your favorite gladiator. Now, these two things, this first one by Ancient Aliens, there is some good information in that, but just keep in mind, I'm not supporting, ascribing, or endorsing the Ancient Aliens point of view. I just thought it was a fun video. But this BBC documentary, I really want you to look at. And Gobeklitepe is this site in Turkey. With that, it's a site in Turkey that was built during the Younger Dryas. And we are getting past this video. Okay, almost there, almost there. All right, no, almost. Okay. This is a really good video. It's only about 9.5 minutes long, but it talks about how Göbekli Tepe was discovered, what makes it unique, and then this guy talks quite a bit about what was important to the people and how they built it. And I think it does bear closer scrutiny. I want you to do some of your own research on Göbekli Tepe because I think it is really amazing. These are the guys that are one of the first cultures that invented a battery that actually works, believe it or not. And then if we go to Mesopotamia, anybody want to take a stab at what Mesopotamia means? The word? It literally translates to land of many waters. Mesopotamia is an area that covers a huge swath of the Middle East, or I want you guys to all take notes. This is an important word, Transoxiana. All right, everybody write that down. Transoxiana covers areas like Turkey, Iraq, Iran, pretty much from Western India all the way over to the Baltic Sea and surrounding areas. It's called Transoxiana because it is the space between that comes up to Europe. So it's between Asia and Europe. Oxiana is another word for Europe, believe it or not. You guys have heard the word Occidental? Okay, Occidental is another word for Europe. That's where Oxiana says it. This was really popular in 19th century academia. I want you to remember it. So if anybody asks you what we were studying, you can say Transoxiana, and it makes you sound in less than half a second. It makes it sound like your IQ is gigantic. So Transoxiana, remember that word. But this, I really like Mesopotamia. That's the whole area in there. This is where we get the Akkadians, Babylonians, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, all these kinds of things. The opening sequence to Blade Trinity, which I did enjoy. I know other people didn't. This is when this opening sequence is when they first meet the ancient vampire, and they went to a famous pyramid structure in Mesopotamia. It's considered one of the oldest buildings in the world. Definitely one of the hugest ones. And then several of these, I want you to look at these because each of them, they're only a minute or two long, but they give you a lot more information and background for this area. And I want to share this one with you. I really like the Smart History links. This is a video that we're going to watch. This talks about Egypt and Mesopotamia within a global context. And we're talking 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, okay? So this does bridge between Gobeklitepe and more recent material. Okay, as we look at this, I'm going to turn off that music. As you look at this, we can see that this is where they claim the first cities start to emerge. And I say they claim, that generally accepted in worldwide academia, the first cities start showing up about this time. The problem with that is that cities are older than that in Turkey. And there's some cities in the Arabian Desert that are older than that as well. That are just recently been discovered through satellite subsurface topography. So, whenever you see dates like this, just keep an open mind. But I want you to see, you start to recognize things like this. This is called cuneiform, or the literal translation of cuneiform is cone pictures, because they're all shaped like triangles. Somebody used a stylus to write in. And the first time people started translating cuneiform, they thought they hit a library or something. It was not a library. It looks like it was a public, a depository for public records, because most of what they found were receipts, which I think is really fascinating. But that's not a lot different than today's culture, is it? Most of the paper that's printed right now is some sort of receipt or invoice, isn't it? So this is how this fits in between Göbekli Tepe and Egypt. We start seeing things in Egypt about 5,000 years ago. And in China, we start coming out of the dreamland of China about 3,500 BC. So that's about 5,500 years ago. And some of the older buildings that survived beyond Göbekli Tepe are from about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago in this area of Mesopotamia. When we think about all this, okay, well, they did that, that's amazing. But as you guys start looking at this stuff, what you'll find is things that you recognize as very familiar to what we're used to today. Like when we look at, for example, the Harappa in Western India, for example. You see covered sewer systems. They have the most advanced sewer systems that the world had seen until after the third burning of London. Okay, until the late 19th century, early 20th century, the ancient Harappans in India, and we're talking about 5,000 years ago, had the most advanced sewer system in the world. Can you imagine that? Isn't that it's astounding? And so when we look at the structures, what we're including in the art is the artifacts, and we're also looking at, and I'm pointing on the screen with my arrow that you can't see because I'm not sharing my screen at present. Sorry. These things were made by people that really knew what they were doing. I really like the Ziggurat of Ur because it is like a fly around. It's a virtual reconstruction. And I want to look at this really quick. I don't think we're going to necessarily have time to get at everything that I want to, but I definitely want to look at the standard of Ur with you. And we'll just walk through it and kind of apply some of the principles that we learned with artistic critique. the tools of artistic critique. Okay, so look at this. Hopefully this is big enough that you guys can see it. As we look at these different areas, there's some stuff that I want you to pick out. And again, I'm sharing my screen so I can't see anybody. Whoever wants to comment, just turn your microphone off. Can anybody just give me a short description of what they see? What kind of materials do you think this looks like it's made out of? What kind of detail is this? Now keep in mind, this thing is about 18 inches tall and about 30 inches wide.
I don't see anything. Does anyone else?
Okay.
Yeah, we still see the list of like all the videos. There we go.
Okay, how's this?
Much
Can you
better.
see it now? Okay, duh. Thank you for saying something. Now, when I see this, I see a blue background. I see a white figures. Can you guys see my mouse?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. And I see these red dots right here, and I see some coral. This is coral. This is coral actually from the Indian Ocean. So this is coral that was originally farmed over 700 miles away from where this was found. This structure was built, where it was built. The lapis comes from Afghanistan. The coral probably comes from Oman. Then you get this ivory, and this could come from India or North Africa. Okay, so right away, that tells us something about whoever built this. What that tells us is that whoever built this commanded an immense amount of resources, because the average rate of travel that somebody would move during this time period was about 10 to 12 miles a day on a really good day. And the fact that these pink stones came from over 700 miles away, that means that they would have been very expensive for one thing, but whoever commissioned this had a lot of clout. And then we also see a demonstration of a social hierarchy. And we can see that very readily by we have this figure here, this figure here, and this figure here. Biggest difference. There's not a lot of detail. There's a lot more detail here on the middle range figures. And then these figures is quite a bit more detail, but then we also see people sitting down that seem quite a bit taller than those who are serving them. And then we see this king figure in a throne. And notice this is what I like to use as an example. When people say it's against nature, when folks don't act the way their quote unquote genders are supposed to. This is ancient Mesopotamia. This is the king, and he is shown as a Superman in his feathered skirt. At this time, men wore skirts and women wore pants. That was the nature of things. Anyways, this does not mean that this guy is 9 feet tall. What this does mean, this is an example of social perspective or hierarchical perspective, where the people that are more important with a higher standing in society are shown as being taller. All right, so by looking at just spending a little bit of time on this, we can learn quite a bit about this society. We've learned a little bit about their dress and grooming standards. We can see how different people fit in their society, we can see the kind of relative care taken by the craftspeople to kind of support their place in society. Can everybody see that, what I'm kind of getting at with that? I think that the standard of is absolutely astounding and wonderful for a lot of different reasons, and that's just some of them. I also want you to look at Ishtar Gate, and let's see, I'm going to share my screen again. We only have a couple minutes left. I really wanted to hammer home the ideas about the projects and answer everybody's questions on that, and so that's why I'm rushing through this a little bit. And if you guys like, we'll go over it a little bit more next week again. Ishtar Gate is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and I want you to look at that. And then also the stele of King Hammurabi. This is something that is several thousand years old. This is actually it's a stele, but it is actually one of the earliest examples of a constitution that extends and supports rights for everybody, which I think is interesting. And this predates the U.S. Constitution by literally millennia. Now, if we look at ancient Egypt, they were a huge world power for over 3,000 years. Does anybody want to just take a stab at the gender of the most powerful pharaoh in Heroes timeline? I'd say arguably the most powerful pharaoh. Anybody want to take a stab? Her name was Hatshepsut. And Hatshepsut, when her husband was getting sick, her son was only about 4 years old. When everybody was in the throes of misery because when her husband died, she had herself declared a man. And you see, and I have in here imagery from the time period. You will see her with a beard and a flat chest being crowned as pharaoh. And then after she was pharaoh for about 3 months, she said, God has declared that his reign on earth right now will be in the body of a woman. She took off her beard, started wearing dresses, the women's regalia again, and she reigned as a woman pharaoh. Pharaoh is only a masculine title, but she reigned as a woman pharaoh until her son got old enough that he could rule on his own. And then she had herself declared a woman, a non-pharaoh again, and she ruled. She lived the rest of her life as a priestess. Have any of you guys heard that story before? Well, you will find sculptures of her both as a man when she first came into power, and then as a woman during most of her reign, and then as a priestess at the end. Milo, did you have your hand up?
I was just saying I'd heard that story before.
I think it's absolutely fascinating, and a lot of people don't know that, but she brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to Egypt for the 15 years that she reigned. So look at that stuff, and then the largest temple is in Karnak. It's absolutely beautiful, but I want to show this to you really quick, and we're almost out of time. Oh, we are out of time. We're going over. Hope you guys can stay with me for just a second. I want to show this to you. This is called the seated scribe. This is from the height of Egypt. This is 3,500 years old. What strikes you most about this seated scribe? Does it look like what you would expect an Egyptian person to look like? It looks very unflattering and very realistic. Isn't that weird? This is an example of sculptural photorealism in ancient Egypt. They didn't always do the real odd, distorted, stylized figures. And I think that's just astounding. So when you go through this module, click on all the links, look at everything. And then when you see the module, there's lots of other stuff that you guys can spend time with too if you're interested. But specifically, what I want you to pay attention to are, I'm sorry. Okay, right over here. I want you to pay attention to Gobeklitepe, Mesopotamia, and ancient Egypt. Look at those things. And then each of these are just basically pictures that you can look at. And just kind of go through, glance at each of them, and think about the art, what can I say? What establishes the flavor of the art for that period and that area, and think about the context. And if you want to, we'll look at this a little bit more next week too. Again, I'm sorry for making that aspect of it so short. But thank you for putting in your 2 minutes of overtime with me today. I really appreciate everybody visiting with me. Do you guys have any last minute questions before we close? And if you don't, okay, Catherine.
I have one, but I just wanted to let you know before you enter the recording and leave the call, I just wanted to ask you something like after the recording ends and stuff like that. I just wanted to make sure I got that in because I wasn't able to last Thursday.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I'll end the call in just a little bit and I'll stop recording it. Any other questions? If you guys do have them, email me and I will put them into next week's lecture. Okay?
Is there an attendance assignment for this week?
Yes, there's an attendance assignment for every week. As soon as this recording is downloadable, then I'll upload it to YouTube and put that link in. And if you were here live, you don't need to watch the video again. You just need to write down and submit 5 things that you learned while we were talking. And that's what the attendance looks like. All right? Okay, everybody, thank you so much. You have a wonderful weekend. Remember who you are on Monday and try not to get into trouble. So don't do anything illegal.
Thank
All right,
you.
we'll see you guys. Have fun.